By the way, this is a picture of trees up on Mount Shasta. And I picked Mount Shasta trees specifically because the energy up on that mountain was energy of renewal and rebirth. And it was a really yummy, amazing, incredible energy that I feel in a way relates intimately to tonight's healing work. So, okay, it's 8 o'clock. We're going to start. As always, I'll start with my little prayer of gratitude. So, thank you. Thank you to the wholeness of creation, the mother of the universe, the entirety, for being this live webinar and being the diversified expression of everything in creation and being the ancestors. Especially thank you to them, and for being the divine in all of us, that we may work together today to support the transformations required to enhance everybody's manifesting skills and abilities, to expand and open up the frictionless flow of our ability to manifest like bosses here in our physical bodies, to manifest as humans the way we manifest as divine being, support everyone's ability to be master of that process, and always, always with deepest dedication and gratitude and adoration for the eternal tradition of wisdom, which acts kind of like a bridge in this process. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. So thank you everyone for being with me. It's a really exciting subject, one of my favorites. And I'm just gonna say here what the name of it is. So the topic of today's webinar is Fulfilling Desires by Uniting Individual Life with Universal Life. All right. I have so much information because for those of you who just joined, pictures of Mount Shasta here behind me. I've got lots of great, beautiful new backgrounds for everyone. 5,000 miles later since the last webinar, because we traveled out to the West Coast and back, really a lot of information. Really, really a lot of information. So I've been working. My problem is not, do I have enough information for you tonight? My problem is, how do I present it as efficiently as possible so that you guys get everything? So I think what I'd like to do, because I've been going over all the details, lots of details, is just offer that process back to my divine being, to our divine being, that we may organize ourselves in the most orderly and efficient manner to support the exposition of this information in the most complete and thorough and satisfying way. So I'm going to work backwards from the most recent thoughts I'm having on this. And that is thanks to one of the gentlemen who's in tonight's webinar. Thank you for sending me lovely excerpts from a book by Nancy Dennison called Backwards, Returning to Our Source for Answers. And this is a book that was written on near-death experience. And so I was I had read some excerpts today, and so thank you for sending those. And I was putting that together with everything else that I've organized. And all the information comes sequentially. So my goal in these sessions is to give you the seed first and to give you the forefront of what's happening as far as my perception and understanding, because that's what I'm providing. So my understanding is this, in the nutshell. In our human form, we get a little separated from our natural capability to manifest instantly, which is actually the nature of being. Nature manifests like the whole universe instantly. And essentially, that's what we're doing. We actually really are continuing to manifest the whole universe instantly. But I concur with Nancy Dennison that we forget. We forget that we manifest everything instantly. And we forget, we come into our human form in order to examine the laws of nature, of how that manifestation process occurs with great detail. One of the values of being human is that everything slows down a bit. So it's not instant manifestation. It's like there's the process. It slows down enough that we start to see it under the microscope. So tonight's principles are to look at how individuality interfaces with that process, and then to focus attention on clearing out any blockages or anything that inhibits the process, so that we can remember, or as in having Mount Shasta behind me, be reborn into the reality that we have always been master manifestors. And we are, even right now, master manifestors. So this is the focus of tonight's healings, is to go in and find what are those spots. And Nancy Dennison brings up this concept that when we take human form, we kind of get amnesia based on her near-death experience, that when we leave the human form, all the amnesia washes away and it's like everything's clear. But in the human form, there's a kind of amnesia effect. And I was looking at that and asking, if that is something, is it amnesia? Or is it looks to me very much as if it is a natural, innocent byproduct of interfacing being, divine being, which is what we are, our essential nature, with the physical experience. So then the question came up to me, but we know that there are yogis and Vedic masters and Maharishis and different rishis, and so who in the human experience, having the human experience with the human body, were amazing master manifestors. And they could manifest anything spectacularly. So the human physiology is not ultimately the barrier to the manifesting process. It's not the human physiology. It has more to do, by my understanding, with the way consciousness interfaces with the human physiology. So looking into that interface, and looking into the interface of technology, high technology, latest technology 2017 with everybody. So we've got the physical technology, and then we've got the consciousness technology. So looking into the field with everybody. One of the points that I'm seeing, which stands between one's desires and ability to fulfill those desires, is the ability to act in wholeness, to act from one's most complete state. Now, clearing this out, clearing out any blockages to the ability to act in the most complete state it reminds me, having traveled across the country, and I'm not going to try switching up backgrounds on you guys because I don't want to take time away from what we're doing, but I learned something on this trip about how great, huge, massive canyons are created with water. And the creation of a canyon by water became a metaphor for me of the dissolution or the dissolving of stresses with consciousness. Because water flows and it's really soft. You know, water isn't at all hard. It's this lovely, soft, flowy, like, what is softer except maybe air, right? Or something. It's completely air and space and fire, I guess, are finer than water, but water doesn't have a lot of bulk doesn't have any kind of hardness. And yet, it carves these amazing canyons, and they're huge canyons. And often the amount of water flowing through the canyon is kind of insignificant compared to the size of the rocks. And I always thought that water would like flow down a declivity, right? And the rock would be hard, but it would be soft enough that over millions of thousands of millions of years, that water relentlessly would start washing away the rock. And then it would cut a groove, and then the groove would get deeper and then deeper. And that's how the canyon was formed. Well, that's not how a lot of canyons are formed. Actually, what happens is, it's very cool, is that the underneath rock is like sedimentary rock. So oceans and layers of micro, biomass fall down and fall down and fall down, and then they kind of condense. So it can be a lot more like the first layers of the rock are like sand, but they kind of get squished together. So they're soft enough that, yeah, if water flowed over that sand, it would wear it away eventually. But then what happens is fire comes into the process, and fire explodes up and brings igneous rock in on top of that softer layer of rock. So then you get this kind of hard, brittle rock on top of the soft rock. And you guys can see where we're getting a layering effect, right? Just like the layers of the physiology. And so we're like that. On the surface, the physiology is kind of more dense and more hard. And if I run water over my physiology a lot, it doesn't tend to create a groove or anything, right? And water always has, in energy work, water has this association with feeling or emotion, like the flow of love or the flow of tears or the flow of feelings. So the feelings can run over the physiology and they have some effect, but at the deeper level, they have a more profound effect. So what happens is the water, and I have a little piece of igneous rock right here to show you guys, because this is important. The igneous rock has lots of holes in it, see? Lots of holes, and it's not very heavy. Look, I can hold it up easy peasy. So it's light, but it's very brittle, and it's full of all these magnificent, look at that texture. It's full of these magnificent holes. Okay, so what happens is the water, being kind of relentless, flows down into all these holes, and it flows through the igneous rock. The igneous rock is like a sponge or a filter. It cleanses the water as it goes through, and then the clean water gets down to that softer sandy layer underneath, and it's really easy for the water to clean out the sandy layer of rock because the sandy layer is more pliable, it's more abstract, it's not as hard as the igneous rock. And what happens is the foundation for the igneous rock gets washed away, and that washes downstream. And then after a while, you have these big lumpy rocks on top, and they don't have a foundation, so they fall down because they're really brittle. Can you hear that? It makes a high sound. That means it was made under high fire, and it's more brittle. Okay, so it's easier to work with the subtler levels of being. And that's what I understood when we went to the waterfalls and to the canyons, was that being is able to penetrate through the surface layers of creation really easily because there are holes in it. That's why we think in terms of the relative field of creation as being like Maya or illusion. They're like all these little fine cracks and crevices in the relative field of creation where the transcendental field peeks through. And so those peeking through areas remind us that it's not really solid. It looks so real and solid, but it has an illusory element to it as well. The problem is that because of the illusory nature of the more relative levels of creation, we tend to discount it. Those of us, and nobody in this healing webinar would be here if we weren't on a sort of deep spiritual flow, right? We're in this deep spiritual flow and path, and we recognize that there's transcendental being. We recognize about the Maya of the relative and so forth. So this is for you. That there's a tendency to discount that relative level of creation because it really is kind of illusory. And discount one's own individuality. Because on some level, we all know that we are the universe. I mean, you guys have been with me for like months and months, and some of you years and years. And, you know, we all know that we're the whole universe. We all know that we're the antenna of the whole universe. So the thing is that in order to work with our whole self, we need to include and incorporate those illusory parts too. Because if we don't, then we're discounting part of the picture. We're discounting part of the system. And that will not do. And we didn't take human forms. We didn't take a human physiology just so that we could discount it. So the important work that we're doing today has to do with integration. So at the celestial and collective levels of the physiology, integration is that deep energy that's acting like a foundation. It's like that water that's going deep down and flowing down at that deep level and starting to wash through the denser levels of creation, the denser levels of self. And the denser levels are the rejection of individuality, are the rejection of that which is not what we consider ourselves to be at some fine level of evolution. The more dense the levels of self are, the more capable they are of interfacing with the relative and producing the precise effects that we want. So the parts that we let go a long time ago, you know that there's an old saying, God protects angels or something. There's an old saying like this. Maybe somebody remembers it better than I. God protects children and fools. Children and fools. Isn't that the saying, or is it children and drunks? Anyway, I think it's children and fools, that they're protected. And it's true that children are, if we think back as children, there's more of a kind of a natural, spontaneous, innocent ability to kind of manifest up anything. I used to call my boys, my oldest son especially, I used to call him Ritom Boy, because he would come to me, Mommy, I want this toy. And I'd be like, oh, honey, I can't get that for you. And within an hour, somebody would be at the door saying, oh, my child outgrew this toy. Do you want it? And I'm like, how did he do that? Children just do that. They just manifest up stuff. And so do saints and yogis and so forth. Questions coming in. Oh, man. Loving this. Okay, so my team is saying we wanted healing for the fulfillment of desires. Yes, and this very beautiful point from this magnificent, powerful goddess Jyotishi, who's with us tonight, saying Chandas is as much self-referral consciousness as Rishi and Devata. And yes, that's really nice to have that validation from the Vedas, from the ancient scriptures. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, so the teams, my husband saying time for healing. So what I would like to do is I'd like to go in and look at, for the healing, any areas where there isn't complete and total acceptance and embracing of self. And so I was kind of building up to that, actually, in that we naturally look at the past as a lesser state of evolution. But there are two ways of dealing with this point. When we move forward in our evolution, several things happen. And one of them is that activation of the dopaminergic pathways. Because when you have success and you move forward and you're like, wow, I'm at like a whole new level of awakening now. That feeling, what it does is it wakes up that orbitofrontal cortex, and it activates it and fills it up with dopamine. And you're like, yeah, man, I'm moving forward. But there's a habit right there. It's in like fine levels of the brain to kind of, it's an old habit of sort of like rejecting the old state. Every time the child gets bigger and can do something that it couldn't do before, now it can walk. Now the child can ride a bike. Now the child can drive a car or whatever. There's a tendency to look at that old state as just like, how many of us have said, that was like, just like a past life or something. That was so long ago. It was like not even part of this incarnation. I don't even accept it as part of this incarnation, because that was me in the distant past, when I was doing something that I don't do now. But the truth is that all aspects of self are with us at all times. And even if in the past we think of it as a lesser state of evolution, or we think of it as somehow not as good as we are now, there are aspects of that, just like the child who gets incredible supportive nature. There are aspects which support a level of mastery over the relative, which is far and above what we might have now. That it's only by embracing all of it, then the whole system is engaged in supporting an intention. And we know that's how desires are fulfilled, right? You have an intention and a desire, and then the desire is offered to the seed of creation. And from there, all the resources start to gather around to support that manifestation of that desire. The ideas and thoughts come, and the best way to proceed, and the organization and the speech and so forth. Okay, so what we're doing is we're going back to every point that the orbitofrontal cortex got a boost up of dopamine from a successful action and a stepping forward in the evolutionary process. And at each of those points, we're supporting your ability to adore and embrace and continue to integrative energy, integrative light of being is moving into each of those points, so that at the point where great success is experienced, also no rejection of self, only embracing the self, only accepting the self. And all those points where we looked back and said, oh, that was me, that was like a past life, man, I'm so ahead of that now. Even if the past lives where I was doing something horrible, or I made a mistake, there really aren't mistakes, because at each moment there's an infinite possible activity that could take place. Infinite possibilities exist in every moment, but only certain ones manifest. And the ones that manifest are the ones that, out of infinite, those were the ones that were supposed to manifest. So even if you were dishonest, or even if you didn't understand what you were supposed to do, or even if you were rejecting yourself, or whatever, those moments are also precious experiences of divine manifestation in the relative. Another really nice point from this excerpt that my friend sent me today was the idea that being in a human body alone is sufficient to fulfill the purpose of life. Just that. Just that. And there's a lot of other things that we do in life. There are a lot of details, day-to-day details. But the day-to-day details don't have the level of consequence that literally inhabiting a human body has. Just being in the human body satisfies the desire of divinity to manifest in a human body and to have a human experience. Whatever the experience comes is precious, whatever it is. So we're actually looking back not just in this lifetime, but we're looking back through many, many phases of experience, human fleshy bodies and subtle energy bodies and history of the universe, forms, times when we fell into complete unification with all of creation, holding into the heart of being without hardly manifesting, without hardly even a sense of individuality at all the times, all the different phases of experience of the soul, and supporting an integration and an embracing of what we are. I'm seeing threads of intensity. I feel as if when we're starting to follow everyone back into their whole history of their soul's existence. There are these threads of intensity where we really extended ourselves to experiment, like with great curiosity, very unusual life experiences, and very intense and sometimes very uncomfortable. And in those points of great discomfort, there's a sense of, I was wondering why there's somebody on tonight's webinar who passed away recently. And I was thinking, I was hoping, that I could pass his subscription on to somebody. But now I understand that his presence is also really important here. It's really important because he really suffered. And those points of great intensity, of heaviness or weight or density or pain or trauma, those experiences were divinity working with that experience. And those are the times I think that we tend to blame ourselves the most, like, why did I let myself suffer that much? How could I have been there feels like there's some betrayal in there. So betrayal is clearing, and it's clearing at a very, very fine level of the physiology. That water is going down through the denser levels of the being, and it's getting down to those really delicate levels of the being, very tender. When the feeling of betrayal goes down into the causal level of the physiology, it's really intense. So what I'm feeling is very interesting. I'm understanding some potential in all of us that I didn't see before. There's a divine power in speech. And when we speak, we move our world in some way or another. We define it, and we also sort of enhance it. So speech has that ability, and it comes all the way out to the dense physical material level to do that. But there's this other potential that sits in this part of the body, and it's a potential to project thought force. I remember one time when one of my sons, I think my oldest son, was a teenager, and he said to me, that he discovered. He went from one school to a new school, and so he was dealing with some social situations, and he said that he discovered that his silence was one of his most powerful tools for dealing with bullies. The bully does what the bully does. But if you meet that with silence, with your silence, it causes a loop, it causes them to fall into a loop of self-referral. It was very insightful for a young person. It's not just that you meet it with silence. It's that the intention to speak the truth is there, but instead of speaking it with words, you speak it with silence. This is the technology, and this is coming right now as a download for everybody in the group. Exactly the mechanics of how we do that. That there's an intention to speak the word, and instead of speaking it with the mouth and the tongue and in the vocal mechanism, you speak it with the silence. And it actually, there's a feeling when it happens of it coming out of the mouth area. Silence is spoken. This is the breath of Brahm, right? This is the breath that creates the creation. It's very subtle, but it's also very powerful. And that kind of silence carries with it powerful feeling structures. What I'm seeing is I'm seeing what's happening. Oh, this is very interesting. There's a ripening of this capability taking place now. It's like another layer of the download. First, there's the download of how to speak silently. And the second part of the download is a ripening of it, a refining of it. A way of including the elements, particularly the elements of space, air, and particularly fire. One of the interesting experiences that we had as we traveled across the country, and we saw how the earth flows in these sort of tumultuous flows, and it creates amazing, amazing structures in its own form, is that the transforming element is fire. So the speech, when it comes up to the area of water, which is feeling, right? Emotions, and earth, which then it can come out even more like densely, like with the consonants and the vowels like that. When it does that, it's really the fire. The sound is space, of course, and the air, the breath has to carry it forth. And the fire is the intention or the intelligence behind it. But it refines. This is the important thing, is that a loop, a self-referral loop of consciousness is flowing from the area of being, which is space, associated with space, through to the area associated with fire, so that the intention becomes more delicate and more refined, more universal, and better aligned with cosmic evolution. It doesn't have to come, the thought doesn't have to come all the way up to a thought. It can just be a deep intention. And it's very powerful in that form. And it comes out with the breath. Or it comes out the nose. It's enough that it comes out. Everything we speak, we really speak to ourselves first, before it comes to the ears of somebody who may be listening. So What we're speaking right now is the acceptance, the self-acceptance of the whole self. We've worked a lot with self-definition as a means of enhancing the power of everyone to heal, to self-heal. The more one's own self-definition is associated with divine self. But what I realized in the rebirthing at the Mount Shasta was that that self-definition, once one has got firmly established that, yes, I am divine being, I am divine self, then it reaches out and it embraces all that we understand ourselves to be as relative creation. The whole relative, with its flaws, with its imperfections, with its nervous system that only sees a certain range of creation at any given moment. Because when we integrate the capability, the tendency to see only a certain element of creation at a given moment with the omniscience of divine being, then we get that enhanced field independence, basically. So you've got the point value and you've got the wholeness, but enhanced, like integrated, unified. Okay, this is good. So now I'm seeing something really beautiful, and it's beyond words. So first thing I'm doing is I'm letting it flow silently from me, as silent as I get on these webinars, to everybody as a download. Okay, so I can describe this. It is a tangible, realistic, concrete comprehension of your global contribution, your cosmic contribution. It is a facet of self which is well understood in the child physiology, but the child physiology isn't ripened enough to really integrate it. This level of integration, only possible in the adult physiology. But children have a very expanded, very connected in, you know how teenagers go through like fads, like where all across the country, like the 100th Monkey Effect, they're all listening to the certain kind of music and they're all listening to it, and that whole generation gets into that particular music, and other things too that have to do with culture and social evolution and so forth. And it just happens so spontaneously. There's, at that age, there's a sense, and it's the way I use the word morphic field. You can say there's a morphic field for all 15-year-olds. It's like a structure of creation that has the resonation or the energy signature of that particular point in self-development, in the development of the being. There is an energy signature or a structure for an individual's integration with the ability to, at each moment, be that life which is intimately connected to the rest of creation and uplifts. It nourishes, it feeds, it supports, without exception, embracing all the differences, all the individual differences from one to the next, everything and everyone. And of course, oneself becomes the first recipient of that blessing. But when I look at this energy signature, it feels like a mother with so many children, a mother to the whole world. It's creating a flow that looks like an infinity flow in the heart chakra. It's creating strength and integration in the entire circulatory system. It's necessitating orderliness. It's necessitating a structuring for everybody. Some people in my do sessions got this about a week ago, but everybody who's in the webinar tonight also. Highly orderly structure of the auric field of the heart chakra. Highly orderly. Because in order for the heart chakra to function in this way, in order for the being to function in this way, the heart area needs to be at a very ultra high level of efficiency. It's very beautiful. It's more beautiful than any gem or it's more beautiful than anything I ever saw. It includes all the colors and sacred geometrical forms. This is a restructuring for the heart chakras, everyone. That they are so orderly that it supports your ability to function as a being which has the capability to embrace the needs and desires and understandings and experience of everyone and everything, all levels of creation, all people on earth, your greatness. The field, the whole field, it looks like a miniature in the heart, the auric field of the heart chakra. It looks like a miniature of the whole web of life that's in the whole universe. It's like a kind of a fractalish relationship, fractaline relationship between this energetic structure in the heart chakra and the entire web of life that runs the whole, administrates the whole universe flawlessly. And I wondered, ever since this healing occurred in the distance energy work session earlier in the week, why not all the chakras? Why not all of them? And I'm still wondering that, and I'm asking being why. And the answer that I'm getting is the heart chakra is the center of the hub of the wheel. I think that's a term that's used with regards to chakras because it's like the middle one, and that it doesn't need to be in any of the others. That this orderliness in the center one extends. Oh, it integrates. Oh, I'm seeing it. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Because together, I always see more. I see more because of you. Yeah, I'm seeing that it only needs, it's like the seed of orderliness only has to sit at one spot, and then the whole system becomes highly orderly. Beautiful, everybody beautiful, everybody amazing. I'm just watching it. Incredible, incredible. One of the points that came up this week has to do with the way we describe reality. There are a lot of different ways that each individual person interprets finest levels of experience. It's so abstract, right? The finest levels of being are so multifaceted, and we're ever attempting through our individuality and our individual nervous systems to make order out of a vastly multidimensional creation. And so, you know, it's like trying to draw on a two-dimensional piece of paper something that's like five-dimensional or something. You know, we're trying to interpret through our human experience, a multidimensional universe. And so there are lots of different angles of approaching it, lots of different ways of looking at it. And I'm offering, to the best of my ability with my speech, what I can. And on that note, I'm going to go with a question. There are a couple different questions here. So here's a good question. This is from the gentleman who sent the excerpt from the Near-Death Experience book. It's interesting. So therefore, I'd be curious to know how you perceive your downloading experiences. And I bet your webinar viewers might also find your insights valuable. So there's a level of ourselves that's never out of knowing. It's like omniscient. That level of self is omniscient. And from a moment-to-moment basis, we are dealing with life. So in any given moment, there will be information that we really need that's pertinent to that moment, and information that's not. So the principle has to do with how do we filter an infinity, a universe of information at any given moment. The information, in my experience, all comes from being, and it's all divine being speaking to itself through us as the instruments of divine being, as aspects of divinity themselves. So in my opinion, it's not like, and this is just my experience because I know different people are different. You know, some people feel like I have a good friend who gets downloads from ascended masters and so like that. And that's all good. It's all fine. Everybody's welcome to do it the way that works best for them. But my experience is that the information that comes is divinity self-speaking. And the better the instrument is able to be expanded to its all-embracing form, which is the overall theme of today's session, the more complete the information is, the more pertinent it is to the particular situations at hand. If there's no part of myself that I'm rejecting, then it means that that part of myself will also get its nuance of the information. It helps the filtering system. So let's look at the filtering system for a minute, because this is really interesting. Remember my diagram. Okay, so we've got the deepest levels of self are being. This is the divine being level, or these two deepest levels. You've got absolute, silent, infinite, unbounded divine being, and then you've kind of got the warmed up level of it. You've got Purusha and Prakriti, or Purusha and Paraprakriti. So the deep levels. And then what happens is that all information is there, and it comes across that gap between infinite being and the more manifest levels of self. And these three deepest levels of self here, the causal, astral, and emotional bodies, in a sense work together as a unit to allow specific information to come at any given moment. And then at the level of the emotional body, we experience first the feeling, the finest feeling of that information. So really these two levels here are more or less, we could say, the filters. So what we've got going here mechanically is the causal level of the physiology is where we find karma, and like vows and promises often will sit down in this area. Also to a certain degree impressions, but more impressions are in the astral level. The astral level is really like this incredible fine filter for everything that is can be found here in the gap between infinite being and the manifest self. And then these filters here have an association with the cerebellum, right? Because the cerebellum is the part of the brain that's responsible for filtering information as it's received through the senses. Note to self, I need to know more about the cerebellum. I'm not a doctor, so I'm sure that even with the cerebellum, there probably is way, if we look at that whole system, there's a lot of little organs in there, how there are organs that fulfill the roles that are played out by the causal and astral bodies. But it's in that area where a lot of the blockages that disallow us from knowing everything we need to know, or knowing to the fullest capability everything and the direction that we're moving as beings. So I'm just looking at that level of everyone's physiologies. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for sharing your beautiful beings with me. And what I'm seeing happening is a dual flow. There's a flow from the denser levels of self down through the astral and causal levels, and there's a flow from infinite self up through the causal and astral levels. And it's like it's definitely a self-referral loop. The way the filtering system functions at any given moment is a byproduct of the interface between the denser level of experience and the finer level of experience. So really what we're looking at here are these two levels interacting with each other, and then they're causing these deeper levels to have a certain specific shape. Good. That's why we have to be super accepting of ourselves, of our individualities, right? So I'm offering that desire to have integrated more the individuality with the infinite being as the vehicle by which the information of how the filtering system works. See, now already the filtering system looks like it's bigger, right? Because mental body too, right? You've got your subconscious and unconscious mind in there, and that does some filtering as well, of course. It's like learning to play an instrument or something. It's like learning to do anything. You take a stab at it, and then you kind of analyze what happened. And then based on that analysis, there's a problem-solving period. You know, okay, well, this is what I liked about it, this is what I didn't like. So if I want to adjust that, then, you know, how do I take the next stab at this thing? What I'm feeling is beautiful, rich quality of that primordial energy, and this comes from Mount Shasta, that primordial energy of fascination with the human experience, which was present in the spirit world before taking the human form, and which fuels all of it's behind the whole human experience. It's behind the whole human experience, and it's intense bliss. It's intense bliss. And we know that a lot of times human experience is not intense bliss. So the intense bliss was getting filtered out. And the intense bliss comes from knowingness. It comes from knowing that the human experience alone is sufficient to satisfy the intention by which we manifested in the first place. So that's just, this is moving through the filter. This is moving through the filter. It's an extreme experience of self-acceptance. Good, good. This is going into all those spots that we were working with earlier, that all those points in the experience where we were putting our individuality down a little bit and saying, oh, well, that was before I learned to play the instrument. You know, I wasn't good at playing the instrument then, so forget me back then. So we're just letting all that, letting it move into all those moments in the creative process, in the experience of being. And that includes that move that we did earlier, moving back beyond the human experience into all the deeper levels of cosmic experience. That initiative, primordial passion for life itself. and it's going back, and it's going back, and it's affecting the 5 elements, and it's affecting the fire. It's refining the fire, and the fire is refining down to its deepest, sweetest, most fundamental. And again, the fire, it's a little bit like the heart chakra being in the middle, right? There are 5 elements, and the fire is like the center one, and it's the transformative one. So supporting it at that level. We've come to a very, very delicate part of our webinar, very tender spot where we have both an intensity of the passion that fuels the existence of life. And so that's like very intense, but at the same time, it's very, 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 very refined, like so delicate. I'm just feeling it where it wants to go and what it wants to do. Like no pushing, just being. I'm just feeling it. And what it's doing is it's sitting like a lamp at the door between manifest self and unmanifest self. And it's holy. And it's feeding into the field of pure infinite being at the same time that it's feeding into the field of manifest being. And our bodies, our physical bodies, are interpreting it as ojas, which is a light medicine that we make. But my experience is that it's more than that. That it is a level of self-communication between divinity and its own manifested field of creation that's so delicate. It's like that silent speech that we were talking about earlier. It's so delicate. It's deeply, deeply powerful. It's able to communicate a level of absolute truth and reality, which is far and beyond anything that we have previously been able to communicate to ourselves. So for the dense level of self, where we are in our webinar with our human bodies, is communicating an understanding of self that is far and beyond anything that we've had previously. You're doing it. I'm seeing great forces in creation, particularly from the deepest levels, so the unbounded, unmanifest levels of creation, but also from the denser level, also from the physiology. It's like the physiology agrees. So they're working together to stabilize that energy in that gap so that it's ever present as the reality of that point in creation, so that it works in favor of infinite being of the universe and the individuality at the same time, always. Beautiful. This is so beautiful. You guys are amazing. You're doing this. And as it's happening now, I'm seeing really very abstract. I'm seeing movements of being. There's a lot of self-acceptance in, looks like these levels here of self, mostly mental and emotional levels. Self-acceptance is flowing in a very dynamic way, and it's really supporting an ability to create a very integrated love within families. So families are being blessed right now. Parents and grandparents and back, and into countries, nations. Your nation. Oh, to my team, I remember the third question. Beautiful. As we work with the ancestors, the physiology is upgraded from a very fine level. When the physiology deals with its day-to-day experiences in such a way that day-to-day experiences are not supportive of highest health, then that's a level of rejection. That's a level of somehow manipulating, like say the food is going into the body and the way the metabolism is working isn't supporting every bit of the food to be completely healing and nourishing and health giving, right? Like maybe it's causing some little toxic buildup somewhere in the system. This is interpretation of the material in the body as not supportive of life. So that interpretation is a byproduct of not fully, totally, cleanly accepting every aspect of self, even me in a past life when I was a criminal, or even me when I was a teenager and said something that hurt my friend's feelings, or in one of those really fabulous, crazy old dense little threads that I saw when I was looking out at us in the whole universe. And there are these places where we went into really crazy dense intensities. Like, oh my goodness. Like destroying solar systems and crazy stuff like that. Really, 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 in the formation of our universe, in the billions of years that the universe has been forming, a lot of stuff has been created and a lot of stuff has been destroyed. And we've been part of that. So that acceptance, it's for the ancestors because they have to have it too. The beauty is that particularly the further back ancestors who are not in your ancestor, being a member of your family ancestor body anymore, have been through gaps. They've been through the spirit world and they understand how precious they are, and they understand their role as how much courage it takes and how much strength of being it takes to be a human being, particularly a human being with a lot of amnesia. I was also asking, are there some kind of little fine, delicate vows in the causal or astral level of the physiology that cause that amnesia? Because if we could just come into the lifetime like the great saints and yogis and sages and just completely remember everything, then we could be like them and we could just manifest everything. So are there little vows or promises to self or something like that also that causes that? I mean, there are advantages to not remembering, right? The advantages that this lady in this book pointed out, one that I hadn't thought of, but it was quite brilliant. And that is that we get the element of surprise. If you know everything, she said this, it was so cool. And I thought this about learning before. If you know everything, then you don't have the experience of learning. Interesting, isn't it? It's a beautiful concept. The experience of learning, the experiences of surprise, the experience of, I didn't know that, and now I know it. That's amazing experience. That's like a cool experience that we have over and over again. And every time it activates up a dopaminergic flush through that orbitocortex or whatever it is, orbitofrontal cortex. When I thought of the word, I got a dopaminergic flush through my orbitofrontal cortex. So I'm just saying. Anyway. So if we remembered everything, if we knew everything instantly, then we wouldn't have that experience, right? And that's a nice experience. And that's one of the reasons that we take human form, to have that experience over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. But the passion part of learning is forgetting. Oh, yes, it's beautiful. Thank you, my dear, for bringing up that point. part of learning is forgetting. That's right, because when we forget, we experience wholeness again. One of the reasons that the ancestors are able to be so amazingly supportive after they leave their bodies is because they're in a space where they understand more fully what it takes to be human and what it is to be human, and how simply living in the human body itself is sufficient to justify existence. Anyway, there could be some vows or promises to self that I'll be more forgetful in this lifetime, and then in another time, maybe a lifetime, I'll be less forgetful. I'm just asking being if that's the case and if those need to be cleared. And the answer is no. It seems that the capabilities to remember and forget fluctuate moment by moment. Sometimes we remember a lot, and sometimes we don't remember. And it has more to do with the needs of the moment, the specific moment that we're in. And so my question then back to divine being is, well, how can we support maximum capability to have the resources, like the most resources that we need in any moment? And is it necessary in the human condition to have that experience of learning? Is that experience so important that it's worth giving up the ability to be omniscient? Maybe being omniscient is also very cool. And the answer back is that being is so big and it's so infinite that a human lifetime is really, really, really short. And so in that little tiny blip of a human lifetime, that just during that time we're not omniscient, that's kind of like the fun, part of the fun of being in the human experience. And my question back again is, yes, but there are times in the human experience, what we're doing here, we're doing something unique in these webinars. We're moving ourselves towards the ability to function completely integrated between the human experience and the divine experience. Divinity wants this. My answer back is divinity wants this. Here's another. I can't say your name, my love, because this goes online. Oh, but it's okay. But I'm just putting up the question and reading. Part of learning is forgetting. The student on the mountain of enlightenment was asked by the master to slip on the ice and start over at the bottom of the mountain of enlightenment for a much fuller experience. Right. Right. So that's what we're doing, is we're going for a fuller experience. Oh, so what you're saying is that always still with the limitations and boundaries. Yes, but what I'm saying is the fact that the physiology exists means already there are limitations and boundaries. Because the physiology, the physical body is bound in space-time. The being is not, but the physical body is. So that boundary and limitation is already naturally present. And to the degree to which, this is the big challenge. This is like an amazing challenge that we're asking, that being is asking of itself, of all of us as a collective. And in this, healing session, is how, in the context of the human experience, do we utterly and completely transcend the context of the human experience and at the same time maintain absolute complete integration with the human experience? That's a big question. So I'm going to let that question stew for just a minute while I answer another question that came in from the emails today, because this is important and we're getting close to our end and I don't want anyone to be left out. I love you all dearly. So the question is, can we please do a healing for manifesting money living in Dharma? And this lady's experience, this beautiful spiritual woman, living and working in the field that brings her most blissful joy by being an instrument of healing and helping other people in their progress in the spiritual path. And her family's taken care of in the most basic needs, and they live a really happy life. But the bank account is not reflecting the natural joy and ease that we feel in all the other areas of our life. Please, can we do a healing for more money to flow through into everyone's bank accounts? So let's use this question and kind of combine it with this point that we've come to in our webinar of complete integration of total divinity in the field of the relative, and supporting a much more powerful ability to approach situations like this that people have. I'm sure other people in the webinar have the same situation, right? So we all deserve, everyone deserves. First thing that we're doing is we're supporting the ability of awareness to move into the bank account and feel what it feels like now. First, the way it feels when it's not completely full. Then, offering that to the fullness of total being. And it's interesting, that quality that activated earlier, the download for each of us to be great, to be world level, masterful level of greatness. That quality to be, remember, the nourishing, all the whole world were your children, and like that. That quality takes into account the entire complex multiplicity of the financial system of our world. And I have a son my oldest son, the Ritom boy, is going into that field as a profession. And let me tell you, he comes and he takes these crazy tests where he's got to, crazy tests where he has to learn about details of the way the financial system works. That's insanely detailed. It's it's almost like your brain has to become a computer. It has to process so much information. I mean, the questions on the test are so complicated. I can't even repeat one to you right now. I mean, it's that bad. It's really complicated. So that's able to take into consideration naturally and intuitively that fantastic detail and complexity of our financial system, our financial institutions, and the way they interface with commerce and government, everything. So we're just taking it in like the nourishing mother who's able to take care of all the children simultaneously, even if this one over here wants one thing and that one over there wants something completely different. It's an all-embracing fullness where everyone is satisfied, everything is satisfied. And what I'm feeling is there's a flow of loving intention that's along with this capability, this profound and amazing capability that each of us now has. And as it continues to ripen, we're going to start exercising it more and more. You'll see after this webinar, it continues to unfold. That level of fullness to flow into those bank accounts, into and through on a continuous, ongoing. It's working within the context of the way wealth flows in creation, and the web of life is getting a download from our heart chakras about the nature of wealth and financial flow being unlimited good. Unlimited good. There is a deep-seated, very kind of deep root belief in our world and our society, and it's definitely integrated into the laws and structures of the way the financial institutions work, that there's only a limited amount of wealth, and that if one person gets some, somebody else doesn't get it. And that's actually not reality. Reality is that wealth is infinite, and wealth can be created from pure creativity and love. You do it. This is how we create. So this shift in the web of life, which couldn't take place if all of us weren't using our heart chakras simultaneously in integrated fashion to speak it out to the collective, which has held that deep root belief so deeply for so long, and it got so stuck down in the deepest levels, way down at the causal level of the physiologies of all the beings on earth. So what's happening is I'm seeing it opening up, and as it opens, it's actually being supported by certain frequencies of sound that are making kind of a little bit of a crackling sound. That crackling sound is related to the sound that fire makes because, as I mentioned before, fire is the transformative element. So it's flowing, and it is continuing to flow. And thank you to the ability to work with the 5 elements, which I think we'll need to talk a little bit more about tomorrow, because I noticed that manifesting is intimately connected to our ability to work with the 5 elements, because everything in our world is made of the 5 elements. So we need to understand them in more detail in order to be able to interface our consciousness with them in such a way as to produce very specific manifestations. Oh, I want us all to just be able to hold out our hands and manifest stuff. We had the experience on the trip across the country that one of my sons kept finding money in his shoes. He was like, I was hiking all day with this. What is it? Oh, it's money. I came home from the store the other day and money just fell out of my hair. I was like, how did that happen? So we can manifest. We'll just manifest. Everybody's read the autobiography of a yogi and how there were these saints in India that just manifested money out of nothing. Gurudev had a box and he just pulled money out of it. And some guy had a pond. He'd dive in the pond with the crocodiles and then just pull money out. I think we all need to get boxes. All right, my dears. Thank you, everyone, for being with me tonight. We're at our time. I absolutely love the work that we did today. It was amazing. I'm so glad we have this recording, and everybody will get copies of the recording, because the work was quite abstract, and we might forget it if we didn't have the recording. Thank you. Oh, I'm getting thank yous. Thank you all for being with me. It's beautiful. We'll be doing it again tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock Central Time. And I hope all of you can come back and join me, and we'll go into working with the elements and how we master the interface between our consciousness and the elements to create, to manifest, form. All right. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Good night, everybody. Bye.